Welcome to GP Bullhound's Tech Thoughts. Today is the 8th of April, and we are here with Inge, Heydorn, and Nejla-Selma for our weekly market roundup. In today's episode, they will give a market update and talk about Samsung, consumer versus corporate spending, HP, Twitter, and gaming. Over to them.
Thank you very much, Maria. Let's start with some market update. The market has been focusing on weak retail numbers in the last week, given that we have seen a number of especially internet retailers having weak numbers, and on top of that TSMC warning a little bit that the consumer is weakening. And our interpretation is that the consumer is weakening given energy prices, petrol prices, and so on. And it could go on even further going into Q2 and Q3, and even worsening given the fact that the interest rates are ticking up, and that will also start to have a negative effect on what's going forward. But with that said, we think, yes, retail consumer is weakening, but on the other hand, corporate spending is keeping up really, really well. Listening into Accenture's Investor Day yesterday, they really highlighted that corporate spending has not seen a downturn since the war. If anything, the discussions has widening with the corporates about energy prices and energy savings and so on, and the digitalization process is continuing. On Samsung, great numbers and so on, but still stock down, and the read is really that people are worried about the future on the consumer side, which we already mentioned. But let's break down the numbers on Samsung a little bit. Earnings up 50% year over year, driven by really three things. Memory, really helpful in the quarter, and we saw that already with Micron. Secondly, semiconductors really strong in the quarter, and we also saw that with TSMC today. 34% up year over year in March, really good numbers, 23% up from February. So TSMC is definitely enjoying a strong quarter. And thirdly, Galaxy 22 is selling better than Galaxy 21 and quite substantially stronger. So given that we have the weakness in China on handset sales, Samsung and Apple is doing much better than the local vendors. And that's quite interesting, because you also have Bullhound numbers coming out from March, was also really good, which is, as you know, the main supplier to Apple. So really good numbers across the board there. So going over to Elon Musk and his filing around Twitter, buying 9.2%. It's really interesting to see what he can make up there, because Twitter has been in a lot of problems. And remember, they also sold away their ad exchange to AppLovin, so they really need to work out their business model at Twitter. And then you had last night Warren Buffett buying 11.5% of HP. So getting into the PC market. So now he's big into Apple, IBM, and HP in tech. So his weighting in tech is definitely going up. So that's from me. And over to Nejla on gaming.
Thank you, Inge. And yes, let's do a gaming update. And I mean, I thought as we are getting closer to the full year earnings release for Nintendo, it would be a good idea to just go through what we have and our thoughts. And just starting off with a quick update of software. Strong second week for Kirby, and they should not have any problem taking the series record, I would say. And Mario Kart 8 still going up thanks to the wave of one of DLC. And lastly, Zelda is also climbing after the delay announcement last week, actually. Going over to hardware and our Nintendo model, we know that Nintendo forecasted to sell 23 million units of Switch full year, and with 18.95 million units sold up to Q3, which means that they would need to sell 4.05 million units in order to reach the estimated 23 million units for the full year. And 4.05 million units would be the second highest first quarter for Switch hardware, behind last year's performance at 4.72 million. We know Switch sold around 1.11 million units in Japan between January and March, As a result, Nintendo could ship 900K to 1 million consoles to the archipelago in the last 3 months. And Japan generally represents 20 to 25% of worldwide shipment. The question is, has European transport been affected by the war in Ukraine? What rail lines do they use to get units to European markets? I think they're shipping it by boat and air if necessary, which I don't think did not see too much of an impact. Nintendo has pulled out of Russia as well, which may be a few thousand fewer consoles per week or month. Although they had several shipments problem in January, if I remember it correctly, in the US. But again, they did the forecast after knowing this. So the demand seems to be there in the US, and for Japan, which seems to be stabilized at 75 to 90K weekly. So after putting all the weekly numbers together for hardware, we have an estimation that Nintendo has sold approximately 4.5 million units during Q4, which means that they're in line with their estimates according to our data. It also seems like software is overperforming Nintendo expectations, at least for this past full year. Further on, if Switch Sports, Splatoon 3, Scarlet, Xeno 3, and Bayo 3 all exceed expectations like Arceus and Kirby, I mean, no doubt that there would be continued momentum for current year 2022. So that's it for today, and see you next week.